driven by, ultimately, their desire to have children, okay, and not the other way around.
But that doesn't tell me how many. It doesn't tell me why.
You have as many as they feasibly can support, Mike. It has to do with as many as they can feasibly support. So they aren't having as many children. They aren't having a lot of children to maximize the output of the farm. They are trying to get as much out of the farm to have as many children as they can. And they can't have more. And the reason they can't have more, it's a subsistence society, and frequently their kids will die, okay?
But there's a circular relationship between all of these factors. The survival, the number of children, this is the feedback loop that feeds back on itself. That's why it's silly to say that one.
That doesn't mean that. Well, no, it's not,
how
because
you think about it in economics.
It's not relevant at this point. All right. Yes, it's an equilibrium, but if you want to understand the motivation of the participants, okay, that's where you have to consider ultimately that they aren't the whole system. Right? What is limiting the maximum? Please stop for a second. What is limiting the maximum number of children is the environment, not the farmers. Okay? They would have more children if they could.
Okay. But ironically, that's the point that I was making earlier. That, like, the factors are much more complex. And I agree with that. But, clearly that there is something different. We're still biologically quite similar, but we've undergone economic changes, but also sociological changes. And that's why now the preferences, people's preferences are different. Even though our society could, in theory, support way more children, if that's what people's preferences were.
You're making my dreams come true, Sean.
I don't think it could. Why won't we put her on the
Why? What was the limiting factor?
The limiting factor is
But in the past, people would, kids would go out on their own.
No, they wouldn't. No.
Just all depends. You can't generalize all of human history.
Stop, Mike. Stop this. No, stop. No, you're being stupid. You're doing the dumbest thing ever.
That's a stupid generalization.
No, you are being stupid. Okay, stop being stupid. Stop being stupid. Stop being stupid. How do you like that kind of argument, Mike? That's not an argument. All right, calling shit stupid is not an argument.
In
okay.
History, people couldn't hunt. That was what you claimed.
No, I did not say that. I said in the Middle Ages they couldn't hunt.
In Middle Ages, well, my understanding is that you could hunt in the Middle Ages.
No, it was frequently illegal.
But in other places it wasn't.
Yes, but in other places it was illegal. Okay, so the assumption that they could hunt, or they could do this, or they could do that, is not a reasonable assumption. Okay?
My reading of history is that the children were always finding little animals, hunting little animals, and trading them in for money.
Productivity, well, no, they're not trading them in for money. Okay, nobody would have money in most parts of medieval Europe. Coinage was very rare. Okay, but they might have eaten them. Okay, but this version.
Coins.
No, they did not. Okay, people rarely had coins at all.
How did they trade then?
They would trade raw goods, okay, or they would go to market and be issued scrip. And the scrip was so that they didn't have to carry money.
And one of the things they could trade for would be, trapped animals and other things
like that. Your children are not coming with you to the market in general, all right? And in fact, most peasants did not go to the market. They brought their goods to some central location, and then those goods were further on brought and on to the market, okay? And at the market, trading was done in scrip.
Great, but people ate meat.
Okay,
people ate some meat.
People did not eat very much meat in the Middle Ages. and it was frequently only like a handful of times a year, and they would buy it. All right, they would purchase it, and hunting was heavily restricted. And if you look at the forest laws, it's a great example of this kind of restriction. It was a whole system of laws and dedicated courts to prevent people from hunting in the king's realm or whatever. Okay, it was not the case that children were going around catching small animals and trading them for money in the Middle Ages. I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm saying this was not like a major activity.
Well, fine.
Maybe they would eat them. Okay, they could eat squirrels. They could eat squirrels. Okay, sure.
So it's just like the simple farm food productivity of that next child is just not the complete picture of the motivating and what's creating that equilibrium.
But it's very important to understand that it was not a net productivity. Many people have argued that it is. That, in the Middle Ages, people had more children because it helped on the farm. Well, actually, it cost them something even when the kids help on the farm because they don't help that much.
But there could be basically threshold effects where you need to be, there's a minimum threshold. If you can reach that certain threshold, then you're in like the highly profitable, basically comfortable zone. And then if you go exceed it, then basically the benefits taper off.
No, that what I'm saying is it's a loss. So there's not a threshold where it's profitable.
Well, there is an equilibrium. I mean, what is driving the equilibrium?
But that's separate from the idea that people had more children because they helped on the farm. Well, that would make sense if there were a net benefit to it.
But there is.
But it turns out there is not a net benefit to it.
So a couple gets married, and they have 0 children. There are this couple in the Middle Ages. So they decide that they have their first child, and then they're going to make a decision to the second child. But eventually they'll make a decision that's like, okay, this is enough children. And prior to that, they'll make the decision this is not enough children. Okay, so something is driving their preferences. Something about their understanding of the world and life is driving the preferences that make them know what is the right amount of children.
But that is not relevant to the idea that the children are profitable. They are not.
Well, I mean, it's just
it could simply be the case that they have as many children as they think they can feed.
But let's say beneficial, not just profitable, but beneficial.
But they're not. Overall. But that's not when people are talking about. When people are saying,
doesn't that prove Mike's point about the fact that it's not always about economics when having kids?
No, that's what we were arguing earlier.
No, because I'm saying they have as many kids as they can have, as they economically can have.
Right, but in theory, it was harder to economically raise kids back then, right? But they still had more kids than they have now. So doesn't that prove Mike's point that it's not all about economics? It's more complicated than that?
No, because you've got to ask what are the limiting resources, right? And so if the limiting resource is food, and that's the only one, then, or when the limiting resource is food, then they stop when they run out of food, basically. But there are other resources that are limited. And in our society, one is time.
Okay, so if having kids was such a big liability back then, but they still had kids, a lot of kids, then why did they have more kids?
They had enough time. Well, it's just that they had enough resources all in to have those kids. They had enough food and they had enough time. our problem is that we don't have enough time. Not that we don't have enough food. We have plenty of food, but we don't have enough time.
And that's because of
that's
income.
one theory.
That's because of income inequality. Yes.
No, it's not because of income inequality. It's because of development. Okay, the way that we have to train to work is very intensive, and we can't timeshare that with raising children. That was not true in the Middle Ages. Women did the most work of their lives between 15 and 30 in the Middle Ages, but that's also when they raised children. The way that they worked, though, was compatible with having children.
But as the amount of time people spend per week working goes down, the birth rate is also going down.
The
So
amount of
it's
time
just
people,
not that simple. I mean, it's about their actual preferences.
The amount of time people spend per week working is, I don't know if maybe there's a threshold there, and it's not really important until it's very low, or until like a certain number of days is free or whatever. But your children need time and attention every single day. If, for example, consider that you need to sleep for 8 hours, okay? So that means you have 16 hours left. Well, if you go from working, an 8-hour day to a 7-hour day, you have 1 more hour for your kid, I guess. That isn't necessarily enough to make a difference.
But
there's a driver from a small town in Illinois who walked away with $80,000 after their car accident.
For example, like Orthodox Jews and other they live in the same society as the rest of us. Similar economic conditions, yet they have a lot more children. So why? One theory is just as simple as they just value it more. It's part of their identity that they value more children. So you can't, when you're talking about psychology,
Mike,
you have to factor in identity.
Mike, that's just one theory. But what makes you value? But what are the other theories, and how are you evaluating?
Well, so it's just what causes people to value things in certain
Mike,
ways.
I'm
Economics
asking you.
could cause people to
Mike,
value things.
hold on. I'm asking you, what are some alternate explanations? What are some alternate explanations for this behavior among ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities?
I mean, well, as opposed to just generalizing it's part of their identity to have large families, and other people in the group have large families. It's something that they find desirable.
But what are some other theories besides that? You've only presented one theory.
I mean,
You've only presented one explanation.
Maybe they don't use birth control. Maybe they are richer. Maybe they are poorer. I mean, these are just alternative theories.
Okay, that's
believe that because I know these people,
Mike,
and I know
aren't these communities where many people don't speak English?
No, I mean I know a lot of American
those communities definitely
that are big families.
Those communities definitely exist. Those communities definitely exist among the ultra-Orthodox. All right, and I would say in general, what you're seeing there is people who have not confronted the full effects of development. All right, because there is no community, there is no demographic that when they undergo development don't undergo the demographic.
It's like my Chabad rabbi's got 5 kids.
Yeah, that's an anecdote. That is literally an anecdote. But Mike, that is an anecdote. Mike, all your Chabad rabbis are an anecdote.
Well, but
So what? Can you, for example, tell me what the TFR is of this community?
But I can tell why these people
You believe
chose to
you
have
can.
more children.
You believe you can, but this is all stuff you can cite for me that I can never see. All right.
Well, okay.
Now you're talking about things that are not evidence. Okay, that you cannot even put in evidence.
Seems that It's their identity that is.
But again, Mike, you're just telling me stuff that I can never see.
You've never seen religion.
You can't show me your rabbi's family. Okay, I don't know your rabbi.
But you've never met
I've never met your rabbis. No, so you're telling me stuff that you cannot put in evidence.
Do you ever go to, Shoal or anything?
Mike, I'm not Jewish.
You're not?
No, what the fuck? How many times have I had to tell people I'm not Jewish? No, I am not a Jew.
Oh, I didn't realize it. Can I jump in here? This might be a little confusing because it's not a mic. So, I can only imagine or guess at what TFR was, but I typed it in. And I typed in Roman Catholic USA, and there's plenty of data on the fact that being a Roman Catholic increases the number of children you have. So the total birth rate for people who are not religious at all in 2020 in the U.S. is below 1.5. For Roman Catholics in the same period, it's almost 2.25. And those are people who go to service weekly. People who go to service less than weekly, but are still Roman Catholic, are still just under replacement, like 1.8, as opposed to people who are not religious, as I said, being done at about 1.3. So, I mean, there is...
in my opinion, you're much more likely to raise the birth rate by encouraging people to practice organized religion than fooling with the economy. Because it's a much more realistic way to drive people's preferences about what kind of family they have, as opposed to, their economic realities. It's like
the other thing
one is more of a causal factor than the other.
Sorry, I just jump in to throw out some other things that Jason was saying was, like Roman Catholics in the U.S. I mean, obviously there are popular amongst Latinos, but it's not exclusive. It's a lot of white Americans, and they're not super rich, they're not super poor. They're basically the definition of middle class. Electricians, things like.
Family.
Okay, but so hold on. I want you to, Mike, to go look at the TFR in the U.S. in 1800, and then tell me what you think about the Catholics today.
If you're talking about a fucking trend over that period of time,
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, though, is that is what. Yeah, hugely, massively, they have fallen massively. If the issue were whether you were Catholic or not, well, the Catholics should still be at like 8 or something, but they're not.
Well, they're above replacement, which...
Yes, but they're not at 8, okay? TFR was much higher than above replacement in the past.
But they could just be susceptible to the litany of other factors, whether they're economic, psychological,
Indeed,
math,
and that's
psychological, all kinds of
yes,
things.
and that is the factor that I am trying to explain, because that is such a powerful factor.
Well, look at the Israeli birth rate.
Well, it either is or it isn't. It could just be a random correlation.
So, Dolan, the Israeli birth rate is a little above replacement.
I thought it was at 3.
But not among educated Israelis. Okay, you have to factor out people who aren't developed, basically, when you do these things, if you're looking at populations like that.
Okay, well,
So
basically, so the Israeli birth rate is what? 2? Around 2?
2.4 or something among educated people. Among normal people, okay, who participate in a normal industrial economy, right? Not just like PhDs. I mean, among people who are normal.
Okay, so why do we think that is?
Nobody knows. Okay, it's a great question. It's something I want to know. I visit Israel in part to see like this weird. It's a very weird society in many ways, and so I go to.
Well, I can give you the answer.
Nobody knows the answer, But go ahead.
Well, the reason the Jewish people are so powerful is because they value education, religion, and family more than anything else.
This is not why they are so powerful, okay? They are so powerful because of their octopus temple in Khazaria, okay, which allows them to see through the whole earth. It is a big tunnel through the earth, and they can see both sides of the earth at the same time. And that's why they are so powerful, okay? So don't try to fool me.
Well, nobody knows the extent of the genetic basis of intelligence. This is something that's hotly debated, but it's too hard to experimentally tease apart nature versus nurture on intelligence because, once again, highly complex system, lots of feedback loops. You can't take two twins and raise them drastically differently.
You can, in fact, see a strong correlation between people's parents' intelligence and their intelligence, okay? Even when they're separated from their parents.
Right. So,
and what that suggests is intelligence is about 50% heritable, okay? Which is highly heritable.
It's at least partially heritable.
Yes. And Ashkenazi Jews have higher intelligence than other races. Almost all other races. Maybe East Asians are close, okay? But other races are less intelligent than Ashkenazi Jews.
What about
on average?
If you feel like you're part of a community and you have strong relationships? I mean, that may be one of the reasons during the feudal days, like, they're forced to have a community, right? Where you're to have a close-knit community. Maybe you're more likely to have kids. I don't know.
I think these are all potentially contribute, but I don't think you can have a close-knit community if you're never in your house.
But it could be just some kind of adverse selection from the distant past, where these traits were selected for this group, and like other traits were selected in other groups.
Jason,
just because of the circumstance.
I'm not going to speculate too much on the Jews, okay?
Yeah, what's the conceit of your argument, Jason?
My argument?
Yeah, I'm confused. Are we talking about birth rates or Jews, or what are we talking about?
Birth rates. What I'm saying is we gotta go back to the future to get a handle on birth rates. In the ancient times, women worked hard. They worked hard in the economy, but they worked hard in the economy in a context where their kids could be around. So we have to come up with some plan for women to keep working hard, but in a way that they can have kids around and raise kids at the same time, just like in the ancient world. So that means like laser cutters, it means safe textile machines, it means, 3D printers and all that kind of stuff. Because kids can be around those. They won't get killed by them, okay?
So I'm just to play devil's advocate, I'm not
Go ahead, yeah.
trying to get under your skin or anything. But so do you ever, we all, like most people generally on here, talk a lot about evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, all this type of stuff. Do you ever think about how, and I hate to sound like a postmodernist here, but do you ever think about how different things conferred, the same traits conferred, in particular in humans, a social evolutionary advantage to certain people, and those things just fell out of fashion, right? Like technology takes those things off the table. So, for instance, and I mean this is hypothetical, but so a certain amount of people, not just alcoholics, like within alcoholics, a certain amount of people get exhilarated. They actually find alcohol to be a stimulant, and gives them energy. And when you lived in a society where you didn't have potable water and everyone was at least halfway drunk all day, you could see all the people who would be fucking sleepy and stunad, as they say, from drinking would kind of be out when it was mandatory. When there was like a three drink mandatory, like every 2 hours. The guy who got sharp, because if I fell off the wagon and had a couple drinks, I could park my car in your back pocket. Like I get sharp, you know. So that was an evolutionary advantage for a very, very, very long time, or at least plausibly was, and it just fell out of fashion, right? Society advanced beyond that, and so to pick a trait and to patently say this is the best survival strategy, this trait was selected for this because it confers, forever enduring survival benefits, I don't think is necessarily true. I think it's probably got to be demonstrated. And so, I mean, it makes sense on its face that people who have more kids will, at least in evolutionary terms, beat out people who have less kids. But nevertheless, that's an assumption. And when whatever the priors change, when the inputs change or whatever, that too can change, right? So long as they don't have no children.
So, yeah, that's like, there is like a balance between number of children and investment in each child. And as infant mortality goes down and maternal mortality goes down, well, actually, as child mortality goes down, the benefits of investment in each child goes up. As maternal mortality goes down, then you could theoretically have more children rather than less. But for some reason, it doesn't happen. But I think there's a solution in all this, which we can get into later.
I was trying
radical idea.
I was trying to drill down on why you think it's a problem, though you acknowledge that.
Oh, why do I think it's a problem to have fewer children? Period.
Yeah, it sounded like you at least, hypothetically agreed with what I pointed out, that like basically questioning the assumption of like, well, why is having larger families, so long as you're at or around replacement, why is it just a priority better to have more or vastly more than replacement?
It's not better. Actually, replacement is really the goal, right? But to get to replacement, some people have to have 3 or 4 children or 5. So the social tolerance has to be higher than like 2 kids, because 2 is not replacement, right? 2 is below replacement. So it's a hair below, but it's below. So we do have to think about how does a woman who grows up wanting to be an astronaut or something have a satisfying career and have 4 children before she's 30 years old. I think we do have to think that through and have a good answer for that question.
But it's not like it's impossible. I mean, if women want to do that, they're able to. It's just that most people don't care to do that anymore. And they have a lot of other alternatives. It's like, instead of just having kids and raising their family, they have a million other choices, lifestyle choices they can do.
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's possible to have, for most people, for most careers, to have 4 children and that career before 30, because the intensity of training required for being a lawyer or being, take your pick, chemical engineer, or many other careers that we have is too great.
Yeah, this just kind of seems too, I don't know, multivariable, right? Like, because, like I was just questioning, like, the basic assumption of, like, more kids equals better, unequivocally. And now you're bringing into the mix, the economic means of the family. And are you bringing this up just because it seems like it's been demonstrated, at least in America and the West, that these are the choices people are making to put off for that thing? Because, I mean, there are plenty of people who have plenty of kids who are not, like, lawyers and things like that.
Right, but they will have, in many cases, some other career, which it can be intensive. Okay, it could be adhesive materials technician, or a a nurse practitioner. That's a very intense career, actually. The many families of medical professional women frequently go into that. Why do we need women to have intense careers between 15 and 30? Well, it is because those are their most productive years economically. And now we imagine a battle to the death between societies, right? We have to go back to Darwin. Darwin teaches us that life is a battle to the death. And so one society makes use of those years, and one society does not. Then those societies have war. Which society has more?
And the president made it
it's a society.
Return to work. That's it. End of story. So.
I think the first 2 weeks have been pretty massive.
Yes.
And if it continues at that rate, I mean, even if you think about one of the big economic questions right now is the 10-year treasury rates, right? They're going up. Bond markets don't like our national debt. If this is the pace of what cutting looks like presented in a coherent plan, I'm hopeful that bond investors and credit investors in the U.S. government debt can at least say, okay, this is positive progress, which actually will bring down not only the costs that you're cutting directly, but also our interest rate costs.
Yes.
And I think that's really when we hit a virtuous cycle here, which I think could happen soon.
No, I agree. Actually, the bond markets do not currently reflect the savings that I'm confident we can achieve. And I'm giving a talk later this week with JP Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon, and that'll be obviously a financial audience, and really to say, look, if you're shorting bonds, I think you're on the wrong side of the bet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically
Seriously.
Yeah. It's like really like basically the bond. I mean, there will be less debt needed as we stop wasting taxpayer money on crazy things like whatever the $50 million for condoms to Gaza, which I suspect didn't actually end up being condoms in Gaza. That's a lot of condoms, guys. What is that, a super tanker of condoms? I mean, how many do you need?
Oh my gosh, you guys.
That's a real line item. That's not a fiction.
Well,
is this fiction?
I don't doubt that we did have those items going to Gaza. I don't know if it was that many, but this is
that was the line item. It was $50 million.
This is the problem.
Yeah.
Well, it was probably that line item, but God knows what it was.
It really?
Right,
yes,
exactly. But that's the problem we have with the budget, and why when monies flow through all of these entities, we may have a line item that goes to, say USAID, or maybe goes through USAID to the United Nations, and then from the United Nations it goes to a subcontractor, and from that subcontractor it goes to someone else. It is a nightmare trying to follow that money and to understand what it's actually being used for. So again, going back to the transparency, we need to make sure that we have our eyes on it and that it's easily accessible. And maybe not just by members of Congress, but also the public as well.
I agree. It should be, if it's public money being spent, it should be in full view of the public. But when they want to hide the stuff, frankly, it is the reality is because there's massive fraud and abuse. That's the reality. Nobody needs to hide something unless they have something to hide. Once in a while you've got something that's say an intelligence operation or that actually needs to be classified, but that's a rare situation. That's a tiny fraction of expenditures. The vast majority of these things is unfortunately a tremendous amount of fraud and abuse. Now, and the reason that is so extreme with the federal government is that the checks never bounce for the federal government. Okay, so the federal government can always make more money. And the problem is that in doing so, that's what creates inflation. Something that I really want to reinforce for people is that it's government spending that creates inflation. So when you see prices go up at the grocery store, it's because the government spent more money than it brought in taxes, increased the money supply, diluted the value of money, and made your paycheck go be less valuable. It meant like the prices are going up because of government induced spending, of government spending that results in inflation. So now it's just very important to connect those dots, because people they sort of think like, well, maybe the supermarket's taking advantage of them, and they're not. You can look at the financials of the supermarket; they have like 2% margins. So it's got nothing to do with the price gouging of the supermarket. It's just that the government spent too much. That increased the money supply and diluted the value of somebody's paycheck, and that's why the prices go up at the grocery store. So, but the good news is, if we solve government overspending, and the money supply grows at the same rate as the output of goods and services, there will be no inflation, and the prices in the supermarket now will be the same as the prices in the supermarket in a year. And that's a super big deal, and that really affects people's lives. That's what we're aiming for, and we're going to do everything possible to succeed in that goal.
And I think every dollar saved, I mean, the problem you just mentioned, Elon, is exactly why 10-year interest rates on U.S. Treasuries are persistently going up. Even if the government's trying to make them go down, the market's bidding them right back up.
Yes.
But conversely, for every dollar, hard dollar actually saved, right? So how many ever billion it was in the first 2 weeks, there's actually, it's almost like a 2-to-1 saving, because that means that the interest rate that lenders to the U.S. government charge will go down.
Yes.
At a time when the interest rate payment itself on our national debt is one of the biggest items of our federal budget.
Yes.
So that automatically comes down for every one of these other savings.
Exactly.
And the only thing to be presented as a coherent plan, which I think you're already beginning to do, that alone, I think, will have a 2-to-1 savings for every dollar that's actually hard dollar that's actually saved, because you get the interest cost next year that comes down as a consequence as well.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point you just made, Vivek. I just want to basically repeat that and reiterate that for the audience. When you actually get a double benefit when you bring down government spending, and it's a very important double benefit, which is that you stop inflation and interest payments go down, because the government is no longer borrowing money. So if the government is borrowing money, it's actually competing with everyone else to borrow money, and that drives up the interest rate. So if we solve government spending, in a nutshell, your grocery bill stays the same, your mortgage payment goes down, and your car payment goes down, and your credit card bill goes down.
Exactly.
I think that's what the people of America want. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I
it's
couldn't
a good
agree.
goal.
I couldn't agree more, gentlemen. I mean, it's really important. And I'm sitting here tonight in Iowa, and I took my mom to church this morning, and man, everybody at church, we all kind of stand around afterwards and visit, and everybody's just really excited about the opportunity that the new administration is bringing, because costs are just through the roof for people in my neighborhood in Southwest Iowa. I mean, it's hard. These are folks just getting up every single morning trying to do their job and do the best, and yet we as a government have failed to listen to their needs, and then to be able to cut the spending at the federal level, to make sure that their taxes stay low, and make sure that we are paying down our debt. No more deficit spending. Let's try and balance this budget as best we can. And we've heard plans from, Ron Johnson and others in the Congress, but we've really got to get serious about it, because every one of my constituents owes $67,000 to our national debt. That's outrageous.
And it's getting worse over time. So really, if we don't do something about it, America's going to go bankrupt. That's a fact. So we must do something about it. It's imperative. Senator Mike Lee, I see you've joined. Would you like to add something to this conversation? I know you've got some great stuff as well to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks so much for the invitation. Look, I see this as an inflection point. Every 75 to 90 years in Anglo-American history, we've seen a major upheaval. We had one in 1776, another one in 1861, another one in 1937. 2025, we're due for one. And I think that's going to be the Doge revolution. And I think it has to be about much more than just the individualized, wasteful spending of pet projects. At the core of all this is a fundamental ailment, which is that we've misconstrued the purpose of the United States government. It's supposed to be about just a small handful of things: weights and measures, trademarks, copyrights, and patents, regulating interstate foreign commerce.
I mean, the founders of the country would blow their minds that the federal government has gotten so gigantic and is interfering with people's lives in so many ways.
That's exactly right. And then we've compounded the problem once we lost track of what the federal government's purpose is. We put the wrong branch in charge of the wrong responsibilities. We've been making most of our law, 100,000 pages a year, through the executive branch, which the Constitution says you can't do. It says you cannot make a federal law unless you go through both houses of Congress and then give it to the president. So we've destroyed federalism and separation of powers. I think for DOGE to succeed, we have to restore both of those. In my view, the best way to start is by passing the REINS Act, which would require Congress to enact those laws. And I think to get that passed this year, we've got to attach it to the debt ceiling bill. I posted that on my Base Mike Lee account.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you 100%. I mean, what you're saying is just absolutely true. There's vast amounts of federal regulation, which are de facto laws that are created. That it's an incomprehensible amount. It's literally no human could possibly even comprehend it. If you tried your hardest your whole life, you could barely understand a small fraction of the regulations and these regulations. If you look at them, there's millions of them, and it's not like any one regulation is the showstopper. But I mean, the way I sort of visualize it, it's like Gulliver. Like America's like Gulliver, tied down by millions of little strings, and we need to cut those strings and free the giant.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Those laws, which they are laws, those will put you in prison. Those will shut down your business. Those will ruin your life if you disobey them. No different than any other law.
It's totally crazy.
Well, it is exciting. Elon, isn't it true? President Trump has an executive order that says for every one new regulation that is put into place, 10 have to be rescinded.
Yes. Now, of course, the bureaucracy is going to try to game that by like having the one regulation sort of, when like somebody says, well, I have, everyone can ask one question, but then have a question in like 10 parts. So it's possible to it's possible to game the regulation. So I think in addition to that executive order, which I certainly applaud, I think we need to go in and do wholesale removal of regulations. Like regulations basically should be default gone, not default there, default gone. And if it turns out that we missed the mark on a regulation, always add it back in. These regulations are added willy-nilly all the time. So we just got to do wholesale spring cleaning of regulation and get the government off the backs of everyday Americans, so people can get things done, and the government doesn't have a sort of boot on the neck of the average Americans, which is because what are the core founding values of this country? What has made America great? What will lead to further greatness is a focus on merit, that you get ahead as a function of your hard work and skill, and that you have freedom. It's free. It's the land of freedom and opportunity, and if the government has millions of regulations holding everyone back, well, it's not freedom. We've got to restore freedom.
And by the way, that's copied, multiplied, and 50-fold higher, where each of the 50 states then do the same thing.
Yes.
And many of these federal regulations are duplicative of the states doing the exact same thing, where the bureaucracies in each of the states are behaving like the federal government. So you think about the impact on people's lives, it just layers one on top of the other. And, like you talk about zero-based budgeting, I really like this concept of zero-based regulations, where the default is nothing and build back on top.
Nothing, exactly.
Right.
I mean, it used to
And that's what our founders wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. It used to be like, and not that long ago, if you wanted to start a business, you just start a business. You just go, you just open
no license.
a store. You can just do it. The government's not like prying into every part of like, get the license for this, do the license for that, get 17,000 permits. I mean, like you look at LA and like how it's like, I mean, when I lived in LA, it was hard to get a permit to remodel your kitchen. And now, with this disaster that's happening in LA, this terrible tragedy, just the sheer number of permits required to build a house are staggering. Basically, they've made it illegal. So, like, but we got to start somewhere on the regulatory front. And certainly, at least if we address federal regulation, then people can choose to move from one state to another and still remain in America, and move to the state that has less regulation, where the government is gives you more freedom, and you've got that competition between states. You've got that federal system that was meant to be the case. That was how the country was created. Like, let the states compete, and if your state is being oppressive, you can go to a neighboring state and live there. That's the whole idea.
Federalism is the answer, no doubt. But you got two things going for us right now in the country that haven't happened in a long time. One is a willing president, Donald Trump, who actually believes everything that all four of us have just said, which is a beautiful thing. And without that, it wouldn't be possible.
Let me just say, the more I've gotten to know President Trump, the more I like him. Frankly, I love the guy. He's great.
Yeah, and he's full bore more than any president we've had since the creation of the administrative state. So I think that's number one. And number two is, thanks to him, actually in his first term, you got a Supreme Court that 6-3 vehemently agrees with everything we've just said.
Yes.
And so I think it's possible.
Yes, in fact,
it's actually possible.
Yes, in fact, if it's not possible now, it'll never be possible. This is our shot. This is our shot. This is the best hand of cards we're ever going to have. Mm-hmm. And if we don't take advantage of this best hand of cards, it's never going to happen. So we're going to do it.
I agree.
Now or never.
Yeah, now or never. And I do think you're right, Vivek. I mean, with the first administration of President Trump and kind of lessons learned through that administration, and now in the second administration, the stage is set. And he knows how to aggressively tackle a lot of these issues that have plagued us for years. And folks ask me, Trump's, first 100 days, what is that going to be like? And I'm like, forget the 100 days, folks. It's going to happen a lot faster than that. And he needs to continue to be aggressive. So, and we all know there's going to be bumps along the way. Of course there are, because we're moving at the speed of relevance here. But we've got to get in there and make an impact so that our constituents can see the benefit, because we've got a tough mid-cycle or mid-presidential year election coming up in 2026, and we cannot lose the House or the Senate, because then the president will be dead in the water.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We just need to move out.
Well, that's
out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the people will judge the performance and whether actually we got things done and whether things are better off, and in 2 years. And I think if people feel like, they're better off, the country's working better, they feel like, there's, the reward for hard work is there, that their, that their paycheck's going further than it used to, that their standard of living is better, their mortgage is lower, the credit card bills are lower, the prices at the stores are the same, they haven't risen dramatically. Then I think there's no problem. We will win the next election. The people will reward that performance. So I think that's that's what needs to happen. And if I think if it does happen, there will be a Republican win in the midterms, and which is unusual. But I think if we make these goals happen, I think we'll actually have an increased majority in the House and Senate, and be able to continue to as the president would say, make America great and even greater. So,
love it.
The case, the blanket that Elon, you and I have talked about this. Mike Lee, you and I have talked about this. But might as well just say it here as well: is when in doubt, push it to the states, right? If there's some doubt about, okay, well, we're not sure about this regulation. You got a whole nuclear energy framework at the federal level. You have an entire one in each of the 50 states. Same thing for spending or some other program. Are people going to really suffer if this is taken away? Federalism is the answer. Just push it to the states. And, I think that's a big part of, obviously what I'm looking to do next, but it's governors across the state, whatever, let them bear the load of what the federal government needed. Because that's actually what the founders envisioned in the first place. I know, Mike, you've been a crusader for this since day one.
That is right. That is the whole reason I ran for this job 15 years ago. The fact is, the people of our country are upset. They're upset about our government because it manages things poorly. And what a lot of people are starting to grasp is that it's not just a matter of changing from the red team to the blue team and back to the red team and making sure you've got better personnel in there, because better personnel won't make those same mistakes and won't fund the stupid studies about the drunk gerbils on a treadmill.
Yeah.
The point is, it's poorly run because when the U.S. government is doing all kinds of things that it's not supposed to be doing, that should be left to the states or to the people, in the words of the 10th Amendment, it becomes very poor, very bad at doing new things that it is supposed to do. You can't be good at running the Pentagon and at making sure that traffic lanes, lines of commerce are open when you are doing all kinds of things that the federal government wasn't built to do. We're using it as the wrong tool. There are very few things that the federal government currently does that the federal government is itself uniquely equipped and constitutionally authorized to do. That's what we've got to get back to. And that's why this is going to be a painful, radical, transformational change in many circumstances. But it's going to be a huge relief to the American people. Once we get through the initial shock, and once we get through this stage where the media is telling us the sky is going to fall, dogs and cats living together in the streets, apocalyptic stuff, once they realize that's not true, they're going to feel this huge burden lifted. That's what we want. We want a better future for America. We can't get to...
Absolutely.
Returning to our founding document.
Exactly. Couldn't agree with you more. And I'm actually pretty optimistic that we're going to make it happen. This is I think it's going to happen. So the progress is good so far, and if it keeps accelerating, then I think it's going to be awesome. So, like the cost of excess regulation on economic growth and prosperity is like really underestimated. Like if you basically don't even allow people to do things, like make it illegal, well, you can't, the builders can't build. America is a nation of builders. But we need to give the builders permission to build. And that's really what deregulation is all about. Just letting people do things.
Deregulation and meritocracy go hand in hand, actually. They're two sides of the same coin. And you want to actually measure Doge's success is not just the deficit reduction. I don't think that's the sole metric, although it's a really important one. And bringing down the national debt and the interest payment costs as a consequence, that's really important. But actually, a lot of these benefits of delivering economic growth won't be measured in this year's deficit reduction, but will be measured in long-run GDP growth, long-run economic growth, long-run prosperity of the country.
Yeah.
And I think that's equally important.
I'm optimistic that we'll see a material impact in FY26, which starts in October. A lot of the stuff, I think we'll make significant gains in FY25, government financial year 25, which ends in September, but I think that like the sort of metric we're tracking, sort of kind of startup style, or just and we're going to be posting more and more detail on the Doge website and Doge handle on X is just in so people can see in detail like this is where we're seeing the delta in spending between current spending and government financial year 25 or 26 which starts in October. And that number is really, we think it's at this point over $1 billion a day, maybe 2 billion, maybe approaching 3, and I think we can take $1 trillion out of the deficit next year. Like, obviously this is going to require strong support from the president, but thus far we certainly have that, and also support of the Congress, and support, and also hopefully support from the judiciary as well. But it's I mean basically the goal in a nutshell is pretty straightforward. It's like we have a $2 trillion deficit, which is far in excess of economic growth. If we can get that deficit in half, from 2 trillion to 1 trillion, and we can get the economic growth to match that 1 trillion growth in the money supply, that means there will be no inflation, and also that interest rates will drop, credit card interest down, mortgage interest down, car payment interest down, and prices at the store stay the same. That is a great outcome for people. And I think we can. I think we can do it.
I think
people say it's unrealistic.
No,
people say it's unrealistic. But the funniest part about this is just the hard number here. And the four of us here know the answer, but for people who are listening, it might be eye-opening. Where how much money did the federal government actually spend last year? Not the mumbo jumbo, not discretionary this and not just how much did the federal government spend last year? It was about $7 trillion. It was just under $7 trillion. How much did we spend in this ancient time period known as 2019? Okay,
not that long ago.
This year called 2019. Not that long ago. We all kind of remember 2019. It was $4.5 trillion. It was less than 4.5. 4.45. About $4.5 trillion. That's $2.5 trillion right there.
Yes.
So if you just go back to 2019, that's $2.5 trillion.
Exactly.
Which is insane, actually, that they think that that's impossible. As 2019 was not that long ago.
Right.
And it should be.
And nobody thought that there was
exactly.
an apocalyptic hellscape underway in 2019.
Yeah, 2019 was pretty cool, actually. I like 2019.
2019 was not some nightmarish hellscape. Exactly. In fact, we got along things were just fine in 2019.
Mike can vouch for this too, though. What we saw with COVID, as we were pushing all those dollars out the door, they started a lot of programs with those dollars, and people just continue to expect those dollars to come, even though we're way beyond COVID.
Yes.
Way beyond COVID.
Well, so often people will say, well, you can't reduce deficit that much because what about all the entitlement spending? There's the sort of guaranteed spending. Well, but here's the thing: and especially during COVID, as you alluded to, there was actually a massive increase in the amount of fraud and waste in entitlements, with fake people collecting Social Security, bogus payments to Medicare. The level of fraud is actually staggering, and it just cutting back on that. And by the way, it's not just even U.S. fraud rings. I don't know if people realize this. But there's the estimates I've seen are between $100 and $200 billion in foreign fraud rings. There are professional foreign fraud rings operating that are taking somewhere between $100 and $200 billion a year of U.S. taxpayer money out of the country. And a lot of people realize that. So the fraud in that case isn't even going to American fraudsters. It's going somewhere in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elon, I sent that example to you the other day. Sat down with a friend of yours, works in ID technology, and he showed me that video of a deep fake where it was a Chinese scammer trying to receive U.S. federal government benefits. It's outrageous. But so much of that money that Chinese scammers are taking out of the pockets of our taxpayers.
Yes, and I mean, there's really there's American entitlements are being defrauded by people not even in the U.S. And from many other countries because the fraud controls are so weak on the entitlements programs. The due diligence is so bad that it's actually possible to operate hundreds, if not thousands, of fake people and get entitlements sent to you that you then take the money out of the country, out of the United States. This is happening as we speak. It's utterly insane. So this is why I'm actually quite optimistic that $1 trillion can be saved just by addressing waste, fraud, and abuse. While it's a lot of work, I don't think this is some insurmountable task. I am confident it can be done, and we'll do everything in our power to make it happen. And I think that'll be if we succeed. And I hope I'd like to ask for the support of the American people because we're going to get a lot of opposition. Because let me tell you, from the what I remember most from one of the things I remember from the PayPal days was that who complains the loudest is the fraudsters. Okay, so when somebody is trying to commit fraud to PayPal. Where we would see the most amount of righteous indignation, it would be immediate, over-the-top righteous indignation, was from the fraudsters, not from honest people. Because honest people are like, oh, I think there's something wrong with my account. I wonder what's wrong. Let me inquire. But the fraudsters will come at you immediately. It's like a tell that someone's actually doing fraud because the level of sort of faux outrage is way over the top. So we're going to get a lot of that. A lot of people claiming with fake outrage, claiming that they're sort of, sort of a single mother with kids just trying to feed them. Meanwhile, it's like some dude operating a fraud ring out of another country. Actually, that's what the kind of thing we'll see. So really, I would like to ask for the support of the American people in pursuit of this goal, and bearing in mind that we're going to see some pretty outrageous stuff from the fraudsters as we crack down on fraud. They're going to be the loudest complainers. So, to anyone in America listening to this, your support in pursuit of this goal is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you, Elon and Vivek. I think we've got a ways to go, but I'm glad it's rolling along. And this Doge has been the most aggressive effort really to downsize or right-size our government since probably at least the Reagan Revolution. So just excited to be part of it and have the support of the American people as we move through and, make them squeal in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Thanks to DJT. Thank you, Elon. And you keep kicking ass. And when in doubt, send it to the States.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll take care of it there. Exactly.
All right. So. Cool. Well, thank you, Senator Lee, and perhaps one day Senator Ramaswamy, well, Governor Ramaswamy at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction we're headed.
And everyone who tuned in. Once again, I'm asking for your support for a noble goal. And please help in any way you can. Sometimes it's like the small things that happen on the side that there's this sort of small thankless tasks that actually will result. The Doge is going to win. Doge will win if millions of people support it in ways that I wouldn't even know how they supported it, but just that you did. And so thank you to the unknown soldier.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, Elon, before we all break out of here, I do want to acknowledge I've founded the Senate Doge Caucus on my side of the rotunda. We've got some great co-chairs over in the House as well with Pete Sessions and and Aaron Bean and Blake Moore. They have got now, I think, over 100 members of Congress that have joined the Doge caucus, and we've got 18 and climbing in the United States Senate as well. So you and the president and Vivek have all kind of really gotten everybody to come together, and I'm just really grateful that we have an outlet and are able to do this. So thank you all so much.
That sounds good, and we'll be doing this every week. So I look forward to having members from the House and other contributors, and try to keep the people informed and of the progress, and I think it'll be very interesting to follow along. So thanks everyone.
Thanks so much, Elon.
Wow. So that was Elon Musk, aka Adrian Dittman, and he is a fucking actor and a half. He changed. That's his Elon voice, and then he'll do his Adrian Dittman voice, and he uses his son in the background as a prop, like he's Daniel Day-Lewis from There Will Be Blood, and he's saying that when single mothers who are welfare mothers have their benefits cut off, they're gonna scream the loudest. This shit is, you can't make this shit up. Hope you enjoyed it, Danny. Bye. Push it to the States.
The highest